it's for archival purposes anyways, and then we can kind of post this on our website for the other people if they come in late and they missed that first part, they want to see it, then they actually have that opportunity. So so I'll just get started by just saying welcome to the Northeast Regional Virtual Conference for the Social Studies, NERCVirtual. Learning curve for us in doing this kind of, you know, we would have loved to have more of an in-person type of conference, but given what we have, this is the next best thing, and we're really happy to have Jason to do a presentation for Generation Citizen, the Introduction to Action Civics. And I'm going to give Jason the floor, and thank you and welcome.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lee. So yes, welcome. So this is an introductory to the Action Civics process, and we will be having some opportunities to look at some strategies to implement Action Civics. So first, as your facilitator, I do want to note I have two kids, a 2-year-old and 4-year-old. They sometimes like to barge into the room, so they might join me in facilitation. You never know. You'll also see a construction crew below. They are doing massive construction to my condo. I think they're quiet right now. The cursing sounds like it subsided. So apologize in advance if you hear any noises in the background. So just a few virtual norms here. You could stay muted unless you're speaking, and happy to have you speak up when needed. If possible, keep your video on to interact. And of course, are supporting new ideas and asking questions either through the chat feature or by voice. And all pets, kids, partners, and other forms of life are welcome on this screen. So first, it'd be great to get us comfortable using the chat and do a simple name, pronouns, school, grade level. If you're not at a school, an organization. And then also from a scale of 1 to 5, with a 5 being the most confident and excited, how do you feel about implementing student-led civics projects? So I'll give you a moment, Scott and Ann, to type those things in. I was going to say, Gorman, level 8, you should be facilitating this workshop. Nice to have you, Scott. Every once in a while, we get a national park representative, so it's great to have another on board. And great to see you, Elaine. Great, so just some goals here to keep in mind. And no problem, Elaine. My internet's going in and out as well. I'm also on phone. So first goal here is to just understand the impact, outcomes, and process of Action Civics, and giving you some specific strategies to implement Action Civics. And finally, provide some resources in case you're interested to explore Action Civics further. So just to give you a brief overview of Generation Citizen and why we exist as an organization, our CEO and founder, Scott Warren, was sort of identifying some key problem areas in our democracy when he first founded our organization. And the first one was just recognizing that citizens do not participate. Even in 2008 midterm, which had a record turnout, you still had a majority of eligible voters not vote. We see civics education often ineffective, or it doesn't even exist. Luckily in Massachusetts, with the new initiative, we're seeing that movement change. But other states do not have the same sort of luxury. And civic education is often unequal. So when we think about what's happening in the classroom, more often than not, you see more of a heavily fact-based civic instruction, of rote instruction type of civic education. So the result is the civic engagement gap, where our nation is experiencing this gap of individuals from low-income communities and communities of color participating at far lower rates than the high-income and white counterpart. And Generation Citizen is trying to shift that narrative and that power dynamic. So the solution is Action Civics. And you'll see on the right side of the screen here that we sort of have this process for Action Civics where students are driving the work. They are picking an issue, they research that issue, they develop a plan, and then they take action. This is not a hypothetical kind of scenario. They're actually trying to make real action within the government to change issues that they're noticing. And then there's a reflection process and showcasing to see the work that's been done. And the three key pieces I want to highlight as far as the impact that Action Civics has within the district. The first is the students. We center our work in democratic classroom pedagogy, where the students are building consensus to identify a single issue, and they collaborate to make real policy changes. The other impact is on the teachers. So we not only provide robust training, we coach teachers throughout the process and supply up-to-date resources to help with redefining their role and what it means to be a student-centered and project-based learning environment, and help advance their students' goals with Action Civics. And finally, the community. There's a real opportunity for the students and teachers and district at large to build deeper ties to their community. When students are choosing issues, they reach out to district leaders and government officials and various community members and have an opportunity to engage every year. I know a number of districts, the legislators know this project happens every year and they get ready and geared up to be engaging with students again, which is really exciting to see. So on the left, you'll see the Advocacy Hourglass. This is sort of our pseudo mascot for the process with Action Civics. And I just want to take a moment to show how it closely aligns with the 6 stages in the DESI guidebook, if that's something that you're familiar with. So I'm going to kind of zoom into the hourglass, key parts of it, to just talk about some practices we use and strategies that teachers take when implementing Action Civics. So the first part is researching community issues. This is sort of our first unit. Try to get students to identify community issues that they notice and care about. So they'll kind of explore the media. They'll make their own observations within their school and neighborhood, city or state. And they'll even do interviews with their family members or neighbors, community members, et cetera, to see what issues are happening locally that they might want to focus on trying to make a lasting change on. So what would be great is if you could share in the chat issues you think students care most about. And you could think about your own community. And here's a list of ones that we often see throughout the state when implementing Action Civics. But I'd love to hear from you directly of issues you think are top of mind for you. Thank you for adding that, Elaine. Yes, the mental health piece that was one of our most popular issue across a number of districts last year. We saw that not just in Lowell, but a number of different districts. And the diversity, inclusiveness, equity piece, yes, always a popular one, especially within a school. And that's something to think about when students are doing these projects, is if they are trying to address something very immediate that they see within their classroom or within their school, and how to tackle that kind of project. Right, and thank you for the issues you added, Scott. So oftentimes you'll see these types of issues within the classroom, and they'll have to narrow down to a single issue. And what we do is what we call focus issue consensus building. So this is not a majority rules type of vote of what issue a class is going to work on. They have to have real meaningful discussions about an issue that they can get everyone to agree on doing. So we have this fist of 5 image on the screen. Oftentimes you'll see teachers stand in a line, sort of like a spectrum, to kind of see where students literally stand on an issue to figure out which one they'll narrow down to. So if we look at the examples you shared of mental health, issues of equity, immigration, homelessness, usually you'll have 4 or so issues, and you have to narrow it down to one. And this is a activity that teachers will spend a number of days on to try and get students to narrow it down. And you'll notice on the far left where you have a 1, it says, here's how I would need to amend this issue to be willing to work on it. This is not a no, I refuse to work on it. This is engage in conversation and discussion about what is the problem that you don't want to work on this issue, and how you want it to be changed so that you will be excited to work on it. So oftentimes students on the far end who have the 5 are engaging and trying to bring the people over, the 1 or 2 over to their side, and showing why this issue is exciting to them. And so the goal obviously would be to have everyone at the 5, which is not realistic. So we try to aim for everyone at a 3 or higher, where everyone can go along with it at least. And so I'd love to just take a moment here to just pause and hear if there's any comments from the participants about questions they have about this process or potential issues. One thing I'm going to share in the chat for all of you is that we are in the middle of a pandemic working virtually. So how do you do a consensus building activity virtually? And some of our teachers in Methuen who have been working with us for a while are using Mentimeter, which some of you might be familiar with. So in real time, you're kind of able to do a little bit of consensus building virtually by seeing where people are gearing towards a single issue. So let me just pause there for a moment, and feel free to unmute yourself or put anything in the chat if you have questions about this consensus building strategy for getting a class to choose an issue. Right, thank you, Dr. Lee. Yeah, Jamboard. So you could kind of do post-it note version. That's an interesting way of thinking about it as well. Okay, so it looks like no questions on that piece. So I'm going to continue in the process here. So the next piece is going to be understanding systemic root cause. So we believe in trying to frame the conversation around systemic issues. And the way we have this drawn up is through this image of an individual working within a whole different number of systems. So you'll see on the right, the individual surrounded by transportation, healthcare, education, arts, and culture. And so we really want to try and frame working on the project in a systemic way, how the issue, and let's use the example of homelessness, for instance, an individual level, someone, a student might argue, say, oh, the person's homeless because they're lazy, they don't work hard enough. When we know there's actually systems in place that are impacting that individual from having a home, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's an economic situation and job access. So it's important that the students understand this concept when they are working on their issue that they choose to think in a systemic way. And I think this would be an appropriate time to just share a larger resource where teachers are actually adapting some of these pieces in their classroom. So I'm about to share a document with you. And in that document, it'll say GC supplemental resources. And you'll see that one of the resources in there is a root cause resource. So you have a teacher who created this example of assessing for understanding, that students understand this concept of root cause. And so some of the pieces that I talked through here, you'll see some teacher examples or student examples that can help implement this in your own classroom. So once the students understand this whole idea of root cause, then they're going to actually do some real research. And what they're going to do is called participatory action research. So as I framed in the beginning, students are taking in this project through a student-centered approach, and the research is very student-centered as well. And so participatory action research is essentially a specific type of research where you're engaging with community members and local research found in articles. So if you're focusing on the issue of equity within the school, the students are going to actually engage with community members, with their peers, with teachers, and see where they're noticing this gap of equity within their school, and see if there's any local research in articles about other districts and other schools that are trying to face this issue of equity in their school. So it's not just researching articles, you're connecting with people who are connected to the issue to figure out how to address it. And there's 4 key buckets that we use to do this type of research. So there's surveys and interviews, there's reaching out to community experts, there's talking to legislators, whether it's a city council, select board, state reps, to see if they're doing anything on this issue. And then the research articles, and trying to find local community papers as well to see what kind of local issues are happening to address it. So once they do this type of research, they're trying to identify what we call a policy goal. And policy goal is very loosely based. So we think about a policy goal at the district level. So for instance, dress code policy. Is there something in the student handbook that kind of has an equity issue to it. We've seen students take on the issue of where the dress codes seem to be only focusing on girls. And so students were really trying to change the language of that dress code policy in their handbook. Or, for example, the mental health one that Elaine shared. And I'll get to your question in a moment, Elaine. There's the mental health piece that students are wondering about how to address, and the way that they've often looked at it is by revising the curriculum. They've talked to district leaders to see, like, can we have a clearer mental health unit within our health classes? So working on revising the curriculum is another district kind of policy goal. And then you have city goals, city ordinances, and also the state goals. So people working on state bills. And those are sort of the levels of governments that we work with on the policy side of things. Before proceeding to your question, Elaine, of how do you avoid burnout with certain community members being contacted every year by a new batch of students? So one thing that we started doing last year when we started seeing sort of district saturation of doing Generation Citizen at middle school and high school level is a few districts started to do what we call the guest speaker day, where instead of just having students reach out to the same community members and have a lot of 8th grade classes and high school classes reaching out to the same person, they sort of had a moment where they were able to bring all the students together at a middle school, for instance, and the community member came to the school and was able to address all the students at once, as opposed to getting outreach from multiple different classes at the same time. So it was a way of kind of inviting all the students in one space to come together. Last year, for instance, Pittsburgh tested this guest speaker day where they had panelists. So they brought in their mayor, they brought in their state rep, and they brought in the superintendent. And they had all the middle school students in the high school auditorium for sort of a panelist, and they all had their focus issues already set, and they asked these guest speakers in the panelist style some questions to help with their research, to help them move into the next phase. So that's one strategy that I think is really exciting that can help with that burnout piece. So there's really 4 different ways that we look at policy goals that students or a class can work on. So you'll see the first one here, students advocating for an ordinance that the city council is already considering. You have students petition their administration to create a student advisory council. You have students meet with their city council to ask him to sponsor a city ordinance banning plastic straws in restaurants. And you have students testify before a transit authority to request safety monitors on specific bus lines to reduce pickpocketing and fights. So each one of these 4 examples connects to the 4 different types that are listed here on the left. So you'll see you can advocate and introduce a new bill. You can advocate for or against the bill. Think about the budget and how to use services differently. So like reallocating funds is a common way that students think about policy goals. And then just trying to get more youth voice involved. So the example here was showing that they create a student advisory council. And we've seen a number of districts develop this council due to Generation Citizen projects. So once you have that policy goal, you need to think about who are the people you need to contact. So you have decision makers, the people who are actually making the decision on the issue, and you have influencers, who are the people that can help influence that decision maker. And those are sort of the 2 ways that we think about our targets of outreach. And so oftentimes teachers will have this chart to help students navigate who they're going to reach out to. Are they a decision maker or influencer? Why they might be interested, the power they might hold, and this most important box, E, is like what you would ask them to do. And this is really important for students to understand because it can be a kind of wonky term of like, what's your ask? Students might say something like, oh, I want you to help ban plastic straws. It's not necessarily specific enough. So if they think about like an actual city ordinance, or if it's something about rallying support for a city ordinance, helping the students understand a specific ask will help get movement on their issue. And once you develop the tactics, as you see us going through the hourglass, the tactics are really the action. Right? This is where you're now doing it. So you are thinking about all the different ways that you can take action to make movement on this issue. And so you'll see a number of different types of action items or tactics to take action on through this bar stool. So we think of 3 key prongs for taking action, and each one is as equal as the other. So there's develop your arguments, there's lobbying your decision maker, and there's rallying support. And it's important to have all 3 because if you're trying to lobby your decision maker or rally support, you need to have a really strong argument for why people should join your cause and why the decision makers should make any movement on the issue you're trying to change. If you don't lobby your decision maker, then there's not going to be any movement on it, right? So you can have a really strong argument and have a lot of people rallying behind you, but if you're not pushing your decision maker, it's not going to change. And then the same with rallying support. If you know who the decision maker is and they're interested and you have a strong argument, but you don't have a lot of people behind you trying to push it, it might not push the decision maker to make any movement because they don't see any support behind it. So that's sort of why we had to have those 3 pillars of the bar stool. And then you'll see this implementation plan, and in the resource I just shared with you, there's some samples of how a teacher has kind of done group meeting protocols and developed their own template. It's really important because this can kind of be a spinning plate scenario where you are trying to figure out what's happening with each different group that's working on a different target and a different tactic. And so being able to sort of ground your class of students to know who's doing what and to reflect daily on the progress being made is really critical to the success of the action portion. So as the teacher, you become sort of the coordinator or the lead communicator to make sure everyone's working together and collaborating together. So having some sort of implementation plan is critical to keeping the whole thing run relatively smoothly. And I'm not going to lie, and teachers will acknowledge this, it has a controlled chaos kind of feel to it. And some teachers kind of get a little nervous, like my class is out of control, and it's really, they're just engaging in so many different ways that it can kind of look a little bit frenzied. So once you go through this process here with the students, the outcomes that we hope to address and to see are 3 critical areas. The first is civic knowledge. So what do they actually know and understand about government, about who holds local political power, about if they recognize an issue they want to make change on, they know steps or ways that they can actually take action on it. And then there's the civic motivation, this heart piece of belief that you can make change, even though it can be incredibly frustrating or hard, knowing that if I'm persistent, if I work with a group of people and collaborate with my peers, that I can make change. And then finally, civic skills. So what am I actually good at doing now as a result? It could be something around helping lead a group of students forward. Perhaps someone's developed some really good speaking and writing skills, being more persuasive in their arguments. Perhaps they become stronger collaborators. So there's key skills that we want to see them develop. And then you'll see that we're hoping to go beyond that. And this is on like a societal level, hoping that we not only increase voting rates, but that there's more constituent feedback, and diversity of elected leadership is sort of our ultimate goal. So I'm going to pause there. I'll take Dr. Lee, your questions here. What resources are available to teachers to help them measure student achievement and progress and mastery of content knowledge? So we don't have open source resources available at this time to measure those pieces. When you do partner with us, we have a whole assessment portfolio that allows different types of assessment tools to measure that piece. They're bucketed by collaboration, but then also by developing arguments, and then also that civic knowledge piece, that content knowledge piece that you're talking about. We also do surveys, and the survey data that we collect from our district partners is available to teachers to see what they're seeing as far as percentages of increase in civic motivation or certain civic skills. So those are resources that are available if you choose to partner with us. Great, and then kind of to close out the hourglass, just on this outcomes piece, we are closely aligned with the framework, not only the 8th grade content standards, we are also embedded within US classes. And you'll also see us very closely aligned with practice standards. And finally, as someone who's a former English teacher and reading specialist, there is very close alignment with literacy standards. This is authentic reading, speaking, and writing, and there's nothing more powerful with adolescents than doing authentic literacy work to really develop those skills. The motivation factor is a game changer. So I'm going to pause for a moment before I get into the last piece, see if any questions are coming up about that process of the hourglass that I just went through.
Jason, can you talk a little bit more about the supports that you provide students in working together collaboratively? I noticed on that document you shared there was something about Brian Hodges' group meeting protocols, but I was thinking from when you were mentioning how chaotic it can get, and teachers are always concerned about, is this, productive chaos, or are kids just messing around? So, what are the protocols that are put in place to support students with collaboration?
Yeah, so I think first it starts with our actual training. So we talk about best practices and do some scenario work in real time during our training to think about, like classroom management and different kind of classroom moves. And then as far as our staff support, it's ongoing with coaching. So we can anticipate when those chaotic moments are going to come and provide resources in real time, as well as suggestions in coaching sessions about how this can look, or how we can help mitigate concerns on that piece. And then in our actual curriculum resources, which again, those aren't open source, but the curriculum resources, we have a whole section of different types of tools. So the Brian Hodges example is just one of like 20 or so different types of handouts or sort of protocols to use. So another example would be in our curriculum, we have a sheet of like participation, daily participation, and like what that looks like. So how much progress did you make on your goal for this day, right? In a single day, we don't expect them to get the state bill passed, right? So what things have you been doing on this given day that shows that you're making movement towards your goal? And so a lot of teachers will kind of open with, okay, what is your group's goal today? And then they'll conclude with sort of like an exit ticket or a reflection of like, how much progress did you make on your goal? And if not, why not? Because there might be legitimate effort being made that might not be easily seen when you're in a project-based kind of chaotic moment. And hearing from the group what they were doing, as well as the teacher being sort of the guide on the side observing, can kind of see and give some sort of assessment and grade or a conversation piece to see what kind of movement's happening and why not, or etc. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? And I'll just make another shout out to my team. We have former teachers who are supporting our GC teachers, so they know exactly the frustrations or the anxieties. And so we really pride ourselves in that coaching piece. That's sort of our gold star about our organization. Great. So the final section around just like the process is this reflection and showcase piece. So it's really important to have an exhibition that exists, and it's really a project-based learning best practice, right? You want to be able to showcase the work you've done and celebrate the work that's happened, because the reality is that if you're doing this project within a semester, 10 weeks, or even 20 weeks, the reality of students' goal being completely accomplished is going to be less than likely. It's about the process and celebrating that process and growing along the way. So we really kind of double down on the growth mindset approach. And so the project exhibition is an important piece to that. And it's really exciting for the students to see like all other adults besides their teacher caring about the work that they're doing and the work that they care about with their community. So we do have, for a select number of districts and school partners, a Civics Day event at State House. This is before times. We'll see when that comes back in the forecast to be determined. But we have districts that are doing like local civics days, where you could do something as simple as students going into the cafeteria, again, before times, but they would be sort of have an announcement made in the morning that these projects will be available to be seen, invite community members, parents. Methuen High School did this a few years ago, where they had basically a 2-hour school-based Civics Day event. And teachers and students and community members, legislative leaders, state reps came to see what the students had done. So it's a very powerful and important piece to this process. So one thing to keep in mind here when we're thinking about the type of citizen that we're aiming for, and this is Generation Citizens standpoint, is that you have the personally responsible type of citizen that donates to a food bank. You have the participatory type of citizen that's organizing a food bank. And what's important in this process is that we value is a systems oriented. So we're asking why people are hungry. What's the root cause to the issue, and try to make real systemic policy changes towards that, or at least learn the process and how to go about doing that. So the other two pieces of being personally responsible and participatory are important, but from a Generation Citizen sort of approach, we take a systems-oriented process. So I'd love to show you a sample. It's great to have Elaine here. This is before, I think, your arrival to Lowell, and share a Lowell example. But before I share that example, does any questions come up before showing the sample? Okay, so here's a lovely group of Lowell students. You'll see some police officers there as well, which is important to this community issue that they focused on. And their teacher there is next to one of their police officers. Jess Lander is her name. And Lowell High School, in Jess Lander's class, what they focused on was teen suicide. So they went through that process of lots of different community issues they can focus on. And so teen suicide was the focus issue that came about. What was interesting was that the root cause they identified was more about too many guns in the home and finding and using guns accidentally. So they focused less on sort of like the mental health, the mind piece, and more about the fact that there were so many guns in the home. And what they ended up doing as a goal, which you might not have seen based on the focus issue of teen suicide, is that they came up with this gun buyback program to make homes safer for kids and teens. And they also advocated for a red flag common sense gun reform bill at the state level. So they were kind of doing two things simultaneously. You had certain groups working on this gun buyback program, while you had other group members advocating for something at the state level. So you had this kind of combo city-state kind of thing happening simultaneously. And so once they came up with that goal, what's next? And this is where you get the spinning plates, lots of stuff happening in the classroom, is they're doing all these different tactics. And I won't read all of them out loud, but you'll see that they met with the police chief to get the police on board. They wrote an op-ed, which was published in the Lowell Sun. They're writing a petition. They were putting posters up around town to rally support. They had to research gun legislation to understand those pieces. And it was interesting, they also were building a coalition of the interfaith community to bring in religious groups to this. And so one of the exciting things that before I get to the frequently asked questions, one of the exciting things that came out of this gun buyback program is that I believe they were able to get around 100, 150 guns off the streets. And what they did that was really cool, and I forget who they were able to get to pay for it, but they were able to give, if you returned your gun, it wasn't a monetary, it was a gift card to like shopping store. So like a market basket or something was what they received in return. So it was like a really exciting moment to see them making changes locally based off of their idea and based off of this project. So we have about 10 minutes left here. I wanted to pause and go through for any questions that people have. These are frequently asked questions. If someone wants to just chat in one that they want me to answer, whether it's number 1 or number 5, I'm happy to go through each one, but I think it'd be easier to if you identified one. So Elaine, I see from you the first one here. Does my class need to work on one issue together, or can groups of students work on different issues? So the way we train the teachers and the way we approach it is to aim for one single issue per class. And there's 2 reasons why we make that a goal. The first one is simply logistics. If you have 5 different issues happening in a classroom, that means the teacher has to manage all the different pieces of this 5 times as much. So there's just a lot more to navigate. more importantly, I think there's power in choosing one issue, the students learning consensus and working together. It's a big like SEL kind of moment of learning how to work together and collaborate and see movement as a group. Now, it doesn't always work that easy. I totally understand, especially you're working with 8th graders, the idea of getting consensus. We can't even get our adults in Congress to build consensus, right? So it happens from time to time that it just doesn't work out, and our coaching often helps with that. And what we often see commonly happen is that the issues during consensus that are being argued often can easily merge, that one fits into the other. So if you look at the teen suicide one, during that process, I bet there was a group that was probably arguing very hard on gun control. And the teacher probably found a way of like facilitating the conversation to see a way of merging that. So I think as a teacher, that's where you kind of come in. You're not just sitting on the side watching chaos and fighting happening. You're trying to navigate the conversations and help them think about how maybe 1, 2, or 3 issues can all align under one potential goal. And as they're researching, the goals can shift because they're learning more information, and they realize their original idea is not going to work, and they have a new idea. Question 4 from Scott. Thank you, Scott. Sorry, my screen sharing thing is blocking it. Okay, what if my students are having a hard time reaching agreement on an issue and a goal? So what's important about this process is that it's student-centered, student-driven, right? So the idea of the teacher just saying, all right, this conversation's over, we're going with this direction, is not what we're aiming for. We believe in sort of the democratic classroom pedagogical approach. So my suggestion would be to sort of stick a pin in it and just pause and have just a heart-to-heart conversation with the students about what's going on here. Why are we having a hard time disagreeing? Maybe even doing a silent reflection. You kind of do like some 10-minute writing time, because sometimes certain students might not feel like they have a voice to share or don't feel confident to speak up. So writing about it's more helpful, so that the teacher can kind of get a better sense of why they're having a hard time coming to an agreement. One thing that teachers have done that's been successful is they go back. They're like, okay, we're going to go back to the drawing board, look at different community issues, and look how far we got this time, and see if a new issue entirely makes more sense. It's important to slow the process down here, because this is all about motivation, and if students feel like they've been forced into an issue, it's not going to propel the project forward and allow them to feel invested and engaged in doing the work of it. We're talking about adolescents, and if you're not giving them a good reason why they should be engaged in it, they're not going to do it. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind, that this is not about plowing to the finish line. This is about the process, and might be a moment to pause and reflect. And it's a great relationship building opportunity. So we have a few more minutes. If any of the other frequently asked questions, I know we talked a little bit about number 7. Sure, Lynn, I can talk about number 6. So what if my students feel discouraged or believe that they can't make a difference? So I think it's important to frame this right on the outset. What is the purpose of doing this work? And we want them to achieve a goal, but it's important for them to understand the framing around this is about the process and taking that growth mindset, that we want to work together towards achieving a goal. And I think what's important to do to avoid them feeling discouraged, or to help kind of resolve it, is to note the small wins on a daily basis. So it could be like, look where we were 3 weeks ago. All of you were bickering over what issue we're going to pick, and you all came together to choose an issue, and you worked out some disagreements and naming those things. And so I really encourage really trying to do sort of portfolio-based assessment, where you're kind of accumulating artifacts so that students can see the progress they're making in real time, because we know, adolescents, you need to give them an immediate sort of recognition. They forget what happened an hour ago. So if there's a way of capturing those artifacts regularly, to be able to reflect and praise that progress and note that this is about the process and the growth mindset approach, as opposed to getting that state bill passed. And I think just being realistic that we've been trying to get gun laws passed for 30 years in some situations, right? So giving them just sort of a reality check of like how difficult this process is for even adults who have been doing this their whole career. Thank you, Dr. Lee, again for your question. Yeah, so I did mention briefly the culminating event to showcase their projects to school districts. So we do in the past have a Civics Day event at the State House. The virtual culminating events, last year we did a what do we call it? It was called a virtual town hall, I think we called it. It was essentially a panelist situation. We had some city councilors, some state reps, the Boston Public School, I think he was director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we had some school, district, city, and state leaders participating in a panel where students had generated questions to ask the panelists. We are hoping to have some sort of similar event this year that also showcases student projects. So we don't have the exact details figured out of what that's going to look like, but there will be a virtual culminating event in the fall as well as in the spring. And hopefully the State House will open one day and we can come back to the State House. Any other questions? I know we have a few minutes remaining.
No, this is really good. Yeah, I like it.
Great.
I like the process. I like I like the how we mentioned to students that it's not necessarily the end product or the the goal, but it's really more about that process and how you can always make one step further to your goal. If you don't reach your goal, that's a good enough indicator, that you're at least raising awareness to an issue. And sometimes, asking more questions is what you want.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. And I have up on the screen here, I know I mentioned a few resources that exist once you partner with us, but we do have some open source resources as well. And these are in the document that I shared and will be available through the NERC website as well. Democracy Doesn't Pause, which gives you a number of Action Civics resources that we developed last year in a virtual setting. So those are available for both teachers and family members. And the other piece, sorry, having a little screen. The other one is Kickstart Action Civics. So we have a free self-guided, self-directed online course. It's basically approximately 5 hours in length that you can take on your own. That gives you a little sort of sampling of of the training that goes into Action Civics. It's not nearly as robust as our 2-day event, but definitely is a place to get you started. So that resource is also on the document that I shared. And with that, just gonna offer my thanks for joining this afternoon. My email address is there if you want to hear more information about Generation Citizen and potentially partnering with us. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jason. That was great.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So I just put on the chat, there's a link to the session feedback survey. So if you want to take that survey, just, select the this workshop, and then you can fill out the survey. And then when you finish the survey, you actually get your certificate of attendance for this session. So if you want that for your records, feel free. But thank you, Jason, for this presentation. It's great. Thank you.
Great. Glad I could help.
All right. All right, then.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
All right, thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you.